It's time to accelerate. Hey friends, this is Andy. Welcome to episode 508 of Accelerate, the sales podcast of record where I hold in-depth conversations with today's leading experts in sales, marketing, and leadership 6 days a week. Joining me on Accelerate today is Daniel Rodriguez. He's the VP of Marketing at Seismic. I'm looking forward to talking with Daniel because I really want to dive into the topic of sales enablement and talk about the role it plays in moving the needle on sales productivity. Favorite topic of mine. So, Daniel Rodriguez, welcome to Accelerate.
Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. So, let me ask you a question. This is a question I ask more and more of my guests as we start off the interview, is sort of set the stage here. So, in your mind, what's the single biggest challenge facing sales reps today?
So I think that many organizations feel like they have a very current way of getting the message out through marketing's world, and that their website experience is 2017, but that the actual then sales experience, what happens when the sales team gets that lead and then is starting to interact with a customer, whether that's face-to-face or through another means, that interaction feels like it's stuck in 1997.
Well, how
and
so?
So
give me an example.
I think that there's a lot of sales reps that they say, hey, I'm going to take, I need to have an early stage conversation with somebody that someone's telling me this is a lead I should be talking to. They've identified maybe some pains, and then they say, okay, I'm going to go and have an intro meeting with them. And what they do is they then just take that old version of that intro presentation that they have. They might try to muck it up a little bit, give it the old college try. It may or may not be so old that it's even on brand anymore or on message anymore. It might not actually have any of the relevant information that had been collected in that qualification process through both marketing and maybe some of the inside sales efforts if you have that kind of setup. And instead, they then go and they show them something that might really be something that the organization might think is really kind of an embarrassment. Like, gosh, we've got all of this information that we know about this customer. We have all of these ways of getting somebody the right stuff, and then the way that it's actually executed is poor, basically. And then you see it kind of play out when sales then is underperforming, and people are then kind of scratching their heads and saying, how do we then kind of juice up rep productivity? I think that's a big area that we play in.
Okay, so there's a couple points in here then. So one is then you say that reps are disadvantaged, perhaps is the word we use, is that they are they're using old material, and so that they're putting themselves at disadvantage. So really what you're saying is that by grabbing old content, that to me the issue with that is, it's off brand and it's not up to date in terms of what the company wants, but the real issue is that they have to go back and repeat themselves with the new stuff at some point. And to me that's a real problem for reps, because then suddenly your credibility sinks substantially as a rep and as the representative of your organization. If you have to go back and sort of say, well, remember what I presented to you last time? Well, never mind. I've got something new.
That's right. Yeah. And I think that reps probably sometimes feel like, hey, I know that the organization is trying to support me, but it's too difficult for me to kind of access what I need from them. I'm living in a kind of a mobile first world as a sales rep, maybe in my personal life, but then in my professional life, they're asking me to jump through hoops of fire to try to get access to the things that I need. And really, I just need it like either on my iPad or on my phone, or just like within the applications that I'm currently living, whether that's, you're asking me to live in Salesforce. I'm living in Salesforce, but then I don't have access to any of the right selling collateral within Salesforce, or I'm emailing people all the time. I'm living in Outlook. Why can't you make the sales material that I need kind of find me in the context of this selling situation? And so I think that's, those pains that salespeople are experiencing, we see kind of manifest all the time and across different industries.
So what's the behavior there, though, that changes for reps? Because, I mean, really what you're describing is more of a systemic issue as opposed to an issue that the reps really can control. So when I was saying, what's the biggest challenge, something they can control, how would you translate what you said into sort of a behavior that they need to change?
Well, so we talk about it has to be easier for a rep to do the right thing than to do the wrong thing. They will always just do kind of what is easiest. So the behavior that changes is we're not actually asking reps to really do much about changing their behavior. Instead, we think that the way that the organization supports them and then the technology that's used to support them conforms to their existing behavior. Really, it's really hard to make people change what they do. Where they go to then get some of the things that they need, that needs to be faster and easier to access than the old version of something on their desktop.
All right. Well, here's more of a theoretical question, and we're covering all this before we jump into talking a little bit about Seismic. But you're talking about hard for reps to change what they do. But that is sort of the fundamental issue in sales, right? I mean, if we look at performance statistics about sales, and people listen to the show all the time know I bring this up quite a bit, is it doesn't paint the picture of a healthy profession. Close rates, conversion rates are pretty low. Forrester research saying close rates dropping sort of year after year, and the percentage close rates in B2B and so on. I mean, just sort of a handful of sort of loose statistics out there sort of don't paint something that's really encouraging. So, and we know that a large percentage of the sales team in any one organization is sort of middling performance. How do we change that, though? I mean, that's the thing you say. They're not changing, but at the same time, they're not really performing the way they should. So, isn't really one of the roles of technology to say, we're gonna make it easier for you to make a change to become better?
That's right. No, and I mean, to be clear, one of the things that I've heard from our customers is say, the benefit that you end up getting from a platform like Seismic isn't to take if you're segmenting out your sales reps, kind of A, B, and C performers. It's not to take your A performers and improve what they're doing. They're A performers. They get it. They understand how to be on message. They understand what is the right stuff that they should be showing. It's really to take the B and C players and bump up the average performance of those players, and to really help them. And a solution like ours actually allows you to say, what are the right selling motions in terms of things that are being shown and things that are being communicated in a selling interaction through the collateral that's being shown. What are the things that the A players are doing that are high performing for our business? Well, now let's actually put those things directly into the hands of everyone else so that we can then use model behavior to then drive improved selling interaction.
So let me ask you a question, because this is more general interest on my part, but triggered by what you just said is, and I understand that whole idea of we want to try to make in fact, I've written about it, that the fastest way to growth is to make your B players and C players more productive as opposed to investing more in your A players. But is the way to do that to make your A and B, you'd make your B and C players like the A players? See, because what I find is, and this is I think one of the conundrums we have in sales, is that we say, look, this is the behavior you want to model, but do it within the context of this process we have. But the thing is, the A players they're not playing by the same rules as the B and C players.
Sometimes, so from an overall process perspective, sometimes modeling after the A player is the worst idea possible because they aren't doing some of the right things with CRM. They're not doing some of the right things with the way that they're communicating with their QBRs and stuff, and so they become prima donnas and a total pain in the butt for the organization, and then they get what they want because they've overperformed. So
sure, but maybe part of that, and this is an interesting thing I wanted to explore, is and maybe I didn't necessarily wasn't planning on talking about it with you, but I mean we're talking about it here. I think it's worth a great topic is Yeah, they're not necessarily conforming to the process, and maybe they're a pain in the butt, but they're not always prima donnas. What they've found, though, is that they're saying, look, I had a little success doing this, and so which was, and this thing was outside the process, but it played to what my strengths were as an individual, then if I can do more of that and keep succeeding, there's sort of this open path, and as management, we sort of let them do that. But then we expect the guys and the people in the team who are the B's and C's, we expect them to be much more conformist with regard to our process. And instead of giving them perhaps more permission to experiment and play like the A players do.
Right. Yeah. And I think, from the enablement perspective, when we think of actually the selling materials that are then being used to drive that improved performance, we're looking at, it doesn't matter if you are an A player or B player, we're looking at stage advancement, I think, is one of the main metrics of success. So if we're getting stage advancement, which selling materials, based on the context of that sales interaction, who we were talking to, what we were supposed to be talking to them about, which materials, and you have to have large data sets to do this, obviously, but which materials were actually the ones that bubble up to the top, and we say, hey, this is the stuff that's actually working in this sales stage. This is the stuff that's working at the beginning. This is stuff working, when we're trying to close. Regardless, again, of whether or not that is an A player or a B player, we want to then know what is the highest performing content, and then be able to suggest those assets to any of the sellers because we know it does well.
Well, so let's explore that for a second. So how do you know it does well, right? Because if you look at it, an interaction, right? And maybe they're within a stage. There could be multiple interactions between the account exec or the sales rep and the buyer, or multiple entities within the buying organization. And yeah, we know that at some point during that stage, these three pieces of content were exposed to the buyer. But how do we know whether they were decisive? We just know they took place. This is sort of this bigger issue about how we use the data we get from sales. I mean, we can draw some correlation, perhaps, right? But what do we know about the real impact is, other than the fact that, hey, we've got a process, we expose the customer at this point to these pieces of content, and we find that we get stage advancement.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. The tightness of that correlation coefficient becomes a real challenge, just because of the large number of moving parts of things that are happening. We generally like to think of it as it's kind of bumper bowling for sales and marketing, where within, say, that stage and that type of interaction, there are a couple of things that we know are a better idea than others, and that you should use these things because it will be helpful. But to then to say that if you use this piece of collateral as if that's the only thing that's actually driving stage advancement, then you're going to get stage advancement, would be naive for us to think. But we are thinking about it as, hey, well, sales is responsible for bowling the ball, rolling the actual ball down the lane. And, is there something that we can do with the help of marketing and setting up the system so that we feel like there are some parameters, there are some bumpers that say, hey, if you show something like this, that is off. That is going to be a disaster. That's a gutter ball type of thing that you're showing to somebody. It's the wrong product for the way that this person has come to us. You're showing the wrong case study based on the size of this customer, or the geography of this customer, or the pains of this customer. You should be showing these things because these are the better performing things.
Yeah, and I get that. I think that I think that's a more useful metric, actually, at this point in time for a lot of reps, is to say, look, this is the bad stuff. This is stuff you don't want to show, because we can correlate that that's bad, right? That one we have greater certainty about the correlation than on the plus side. But yeah, I agree with 100%. As I think if you could draw boundaries around content to say, look, yeah, don't touch this. This is hazardous waste.
Oh, absolutely. There's I think data from Serious Decisions that basically says, that content problem for sales is, we're getting a little feedback there. Sorry. is half of the problem is actually people can't find what they need. And then of the other half of the problem, it's that half of that content is not good. So how do you know? How do you know what's the stuff that's unfindable versus the stuff that's not good versus the right stuff? And I think much of the challenge is actually solved with just making sure that sales is not cluttered with the stuff that is not good, and that marketing knows the difference between what's not findable and what's actually not good.
Well, right. And I think we talked about behavior change earlier. I think one of the behavior changes that has to sort of enter into this is, how do you convince sales that it is good? Right? I mean, it's one thing to say, yeah, we got the data and so on. But, one of the problems that Sirius or somebody of that ilk had done the study showing that within the last couple of years, saying that, reps are spending, I don't know, somewhere between like 20-30% of their time modifying content. And I was like, oh my God, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so...
Yeah, total waste of their time.
Total waste of their time. But yet there's this compulsion to want to do that. It's like this lack of trust, like somehow, well, marketing just doesn't really get it, right? Because, we're out there talking and, they've got this, these sets of, value propositions or whatever. And just based on here, and that's just not aligned with where the buyer is. So how do we, and this, I think in your service really and product really speaks to this. I mean, there's implicit in what you guys do, and then I'll let you talk about what you do, is this idea of aligning sales and marketing around a message.
Yeah, it is, but it's good to kind of talk about this in a way at this kind of kind of philosophical abstraction between, like, marketing is looking to control this message and make sure that there's kind of overall message, but then of course there's the targeted message for that buyer and that interaction. Sales is really in many ways kind of looking for the freedom that they need in order to, and the flexibility they need to be able to call the audible at the line of scrimmage. And so, we've tried to build the technology that we have to meet both of those needs, where you have to be able to say, we need to give marketing the tools to not only help to create that material in a more scalable, personalized way, but then understand how it's being utilized so that they can get better and kind of facilitate that feedback loop. We also need to have the flexibility and the freedom for sales to be able to say, hey, if I need to modify something and if I need to make changes, allow me to do that in a way that I won't feel like I need to take it out of the system. And so then, because once it's then like kind of out of that loop, then then you kind of lose so much of the benefit of, understanding, what's working and what's not working, because people then just, would take it out. So you have to just make everything kind of easier than that. And that's really the way, the way we've kind of designed it, where it's not so strict unless it needs to be, in which case, there are certain industries where there are certain, regulatory requirements where
like
it says,
pharma, right?
Hey, this thing is, and we do a lot of work in some of those regulated industries where you've got to have the right disclosure on the right slide. And if you don't, there's exposure there from a legal standpoint that's highly problematic.
Right.
And so our solution is amazing for that. We've got a ton of financial services firms using our solution to do things like generating pitch books and fun fact sheets and stuff. But that's because it's so critically important that there actually is a certain amount of control and lockdown there. The compliance side of that drives a substantial piece of that. So don't let my advisors or reps make changes because that's not allowed. And so the output from something, while I might say, hey, the rep can select a few different of our products that we would want to show in this, in this pitch book that we're going to create, the output from that is only a PDF. They're not going to then be able to change it.
Well, let's jump into Seismic. So we've been talking around the edges. So tell people who aren't familiar with it, tell them what you do.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess at a fundamental level, Seismic is transforming your message and your sales collateral into a strategic asset for your business.
Okay.
So, and what we mean by that is that, I think the way that the marketing and sales relationship has evolved has come a long way over the past 25 years. I think of 25 plus years ago, marketing's role in helping sales was predominantly awareness creation. I call this the Mad Men era, where it was all about billboards, it's all about eyeballs or impressions, and it was predominantly an outsourced function and very kind of difficult to measure the impact to the business. I think 10 years ago, we saw a sea change of the expectation around what marketing is delivering to the organization around lead generation. And that KPI around now marketing is actually helping to generate leads and hand those over to sales became a much larger in-house function. There was a lot of different skill sets that were involved on the marketing side. And we then started to see CMOs a bit closer to the pipeline and what was actually happening from a sales perspective. I think where we have come today in the enablement era is the last piece of that connection between sales and then the outside sales team and marketing's effort, which is that sales is now, there's an expectation within the C-suite, and there's an expectation that the CMO is going to be much more closely tied to the revenue generation of the business, and looking at things like sales rep productivity is something that's actually partly on the CMO to help solve. Obviously, it's the critical metric for the way that a sales organization is run, but that it's actually, there's more of a linkage than ever before around marketing driving toward that.
Okay, so take people through a little bit through the system, and tell people sort of what you do and how it sort of helps move the needle for sales.
Yeah. So if we kind of think of if we think of a sales from the kind of the sales perspective, and again, there's both kind of marketing people using Seismic, and then there's sales people that are using Seismic. But when we think of what is happening today in certain selling interactions, if we kind of go back to this sense of it was, some of the common pains that salespeople are experiencing when we talk to them and they come to us and they say, "Can you please help us figure this out?" Is sales is saying, "I can't find what I need from marketing. It might exist. I just can't find what it is. And I am also lacking the ability to have kind of current day expectation around a selling interaction." So the way
meaning what?
Meaning I feel like I should be able to interact with somebody in a much more kind of digital and mobile world as a sales rep. And instead, we still might be stuck on printouts of things, and I'm kind of again mucking things up that are on my desktop. And sales leaders look at this and say, hey, we need to make sure that we are upping our game from a competitive standpoint. We've got people that are in territory. They should be using their iPads to conduct sales meetings. They should be using kind of screen sharing, for real-time interaction, and that they should be able to very quickly have a follow-up piece of collateral that would be hyper tailored to solving that person's needs, rather than what can currently happen is give it a couple weeks, I'll get back to you. That whole give it a couple weeks, I'll get back to you, and then you got to go back and try to find a way to pull some stuff together, and whether that's an ROI model or the right case studies, that stuff should happen real time, basically. And if it can, and when it does, that can shorten sales cycles, and that can also be its own competitive differentiator in that process. So that's what those are the things that then happen with Seismic. Those are the things that we then help to facilitate using our technology on the sales side.
Yeah. So give us an example, because you alluded to it with the mobile connectivity, and so walk through. Let's say a rep has a presentation to give to, or wants to give a presentation to a prospect. So what's that look like for them?
Yeah. So with Seismic, that rep would say, hey, I got to make sure that I have the right version of this Say it's an introduction selling presentation that they're going to do. And so you want that to be the right version, and then you want to be able to go into that presentation and really nail it. So building the right version of that can be its own time suck. We talked about sales reps spending an inordinate amount of their time finding and then creating that selling material. So instead, they would just be able to use Seismic, and they'd say, okay, they would open up. So they'd be doing this then on their way to a meeting, or maybe it's just kind of right before the meeting would be starting.
Hopefully while not driving. Yes, but go ahead.
Not while driving. Right. You're in your taxi, you're in your Lyft, and you could do this. And so you're on your iPad, and then you'd open up the Seismic app, and then you would go in there, and it would say, you'd find the piece of selling material. So that's that intro presentation. So it'd be available kind of right when you open up Seismic. It would say intro presentation because that's something you frequently use. And then you'd open up the intro presentation instead of, and again, this is an example of the dynamic content generation capabilities that Seismic has that we call our LiveDocs technology. But the material that's in Seismic can also be videos, PDFs, kind of all of the selling collateral that you would use. But this is kind of the full view of what people are then using Seismic for. They would be able to say, I'm going to open up this presentation, and when I open it up, it actually will walk me through, as a sales rep, this wizard-like experience of being able to make certain selections about who I'm going to be talking to. Now, as a sales rep, I have CRM. Say I'm using Salesforce, which is a popular integration that we have with about 80% of our customers. Sure. So it already knows. So then I go and I say, I'm doing this intro presentation, and then it says, who are you going to be talking to? It gives me a drop down of some of my accounts. I would then select that because it knows that from CRM, and then it pulls in a bunch of relevant information from CRM, but kind of behind the scenes. So I'm not making any selections anymore. Some of that information from CRM, by the way, also may have been fed in from our marketing automation solution, and the way that lead was generated and information we know about it was then probably housed in CRM. So that information then all gets into the sales presentation. And what is some of that information? Like, for instance, who we're talking to, and then the context of what we're saying to them is now what we want to build around this presentation. So what we see some of our customers do is the relevant case study that you would then want to show to that person. That could be that can vary based on certain criteria about that customer, like the product that they were interested in, if you sell multiple different products, or the size of the company that they are, because maybe the way that you solve that problem is different for different sizes of companies. And maybe the geography, and maybe even the buyer persona that you are, who you're actually talking to. You would then want to give them a different version of that case study that kind of talks to their pain. And then you would also want to make sure. So case studies, that's a big thing that can vary in an intro presentation. Some of the messaging that you're giving, right? Like the pains that we solve as a company might vary based on, again, who your audience is. So being able to then, just as a rep, just to be able to make a couple of selections saying, oh yeah, this account, this is the person I'm talking to. This is their role might already be known in our CRM, so that it's already there. And then I just say, so can you build me the presentation? And then Seismic takes about 5 seconds and builds that presentation, and then you have it. You have it right there. You're ready to go. You have that on your iPad. You can make sure that has offline access if you needed to, so that maybe the Wi-Fi in the building isn't good. So
it sounds like what you're doing is actually, let's say, like a PowerPoint presentation. You're actually tagging it to the slide level.
Oh yeah, we're breaking it down from even more than just at the slide level. There's individual pieces that are then built on that slide. That's just the LiveDoc functionality. I mean, there's a handful of things that actually a sales rep needs in order to make sure they're kind of like quote unquote enabled. You have to make sure that a sales rep has been properly communicated to, so kind of educated about what is the latest information that they have. And so we've got great features and capabilities that kind of replace that stale sales newsletter or those multiple emails that are getting fired around from different parts of the organization, trying to let sales reps know, hey, here's some interesting competitor info that's happening. Here's some event related information that may or may not be relevant. Of like Flipboard for sales like experience happen with a product capability that we have. And again, it's single platform, kind of everybody gets all the stuff. So there's a bunch of different features, but Seismic is one thing. It is one product. And then yes, you can then use Seismic to then hyper personalize and create that material as a salesperson. You can then also use Seismic to track the engagement with that piece of selling material. So in the follow-up to our presentation that I just gave, maybe I just gave it to you, I walked in and totally blew you away because I gave you this hyper personalized selling material, and then you said, that's great. Would you be able to send me a couple of other things that I would find interesting? And I'd say, sure. So I'd be walking out of that meeting. I'd find those couple of additional assets really quickly that would be easy again to find. I would send them along to you, but I wouldn't just email them to you as just a plain old attachment. I would live send them to you, which is the ability to, for me as a sales rep, and then you could also roll this up to the larger organization, can then see on my side, how is that material being interacted with? Sure. So that is profoundly impactful for a salesperson. So salespeople love this capability, and they love it because they get notified right away when you open that thing, and then they get to see how much time you spent on each individual page of what I had sent you. Right. And so I pick up the phone as a sales rep and I say, hey, this might sound a little bit creepy, but I know you were just looking at this stuff. And then you might say, wow, that is creepy, but also this is super helpful because I'm now engaged with you and your materials. And the fact that you just called me up and said, I saw that you didn't get to slide 6, but on slide 6, we kind of had some of our follow-up material. Is there something I can kind of dive into a little more deeply with that? And now we're having a really productive sales conversation. What we eliminate there is the very annoying salesperson follow-up. Hey, just checking in. Yeah. Just checking in. Oh my God. If I had a freaking nickel for every time somebody was like sending the just checking in email, it's worthless. Yeah. No, you're singing from my playbook. I mean, that's well, we're passionate about this stuff. There's now, upwards of 100,000 salespeople in the world that are actually using Seismic to sell. And so we hear a lot from them. Those are the things that they say to us. Yeah. No, that's good stuff. All right. Unfortunately, we have to sort of cut it short. But we'll have you back. We'll continue the conversation. This has been fun. So tell people how they can find out more about Seismic and how they can get in contact with you. Yeah, sure. So Seismic, a ton of information about us is available on our website. So that's seismic.com. It's just how you normally spell it. We're shaking the earth. Earthquake. Sales earthquake. Okay. Sales. We're shaking up the way that sales and marketing teams work together. So if people want to get in touch with me, I'm more than happy to follow up with anybody. My probably the best way to do that is to just email me. So my email is drodriguez. That's DRODRIGUEZ @seismic.com, and I'm also available on Twitter @DLRDaniel. Got it. All right. Well, Daniel Rodriguez, thank you very much for being on the show. Great conversation. Like I said, we'll have you back on again. And friends, thank you for spending this time with me today. Remember, come back, join me again tomorrow. Actually, every day of the week, we've got something for you here on Accelerate. Until then, appreciate if you take a second, go to iTunes, subscribe, leave a review for this podcast. Really appreciate that. So thanks again for joining me. Until next time, this is Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.